If you enjoy my videos, then please like, subscribe, and share. It's the only way my little channel can grow. Hey everyone, welcome back to Engelbart. Today I'll be giving you my review of the Sega Genesis Mini. That's right, I am striking while the iron is hot, a mere 6 to 7 months after the release of the system. Why am I reviewing it now? Well, you see, I had some requirements that had to be met before I would allow myself to purchase one. I have plenty of ways I can play Genesis games, both on real hardware and on emulated hardware. So I told myself, you're not allowed to get one of these unless you can buy it brand spanking new for less than $40. Lo and behold, the requirement was met, and so I did purchase one. And I'll be reviewing this system from 3 different perspectives. Yes, I'll be reviewing it from the perspective of just the average Joe who wants to buy one of these things, relive some old memories, and use it as is without ever modifying it. The second perspective I'll be looking at it from is from that of the more hardcore Genesis fan who knows these games inside and out, wants to have fun but still doesn't want to mess with modifying or hacking the system. The final perspective from which I'll review this system is from that of the person who is fully willing to hack it to increase its capabilities, add games, and just different functions and options that the plain system is lacking. So, what did my 40 bones get me? This nifty old school looking box. Even better, there was stuff inside it. Like a Genesis Mini, HDMI cable, power adapter, USB cable, and 2 3-button controllers. Yeah, that's obviously problem 1. Sure, it makes for a more authentic experience since the Genesis launched with 3-button controllers in 1989, but 2 of the built-in games, Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition and Eternal Champions, really require 6-button controllers to enjoy. We'll take a look at the out-of-the-box, unadulterated experience first, which is honestly probably how most people will use their Genesis Mini anyway. As you get the device, it's a cinch to hook up and get up and running, which is probably the best part of these mini consoles. You just plug in the power, hook up the HDMI cable, turn it on, and you're ready to go. As far as ease of use in setting this thing up and getting it going, I'd give it a 5 out of 5. So here we've got the fancy menu with various brand new songs that play in the background, all of which were inspired by the music from some of the classic games included on the system. You get 42 games and they're displayed with box art, and you can switch between either seeing the covers or the spines, and it's all just really neat, isn't it? Where things falter a bit is that there are very, very few options to customize your experience, either in-game or in the menu. You get 2 screen modes, widescreen and authentic screen ratio, and your choice of 2 backgrounds or no background. You do get in-game save states and 4 slots each, so that's a plus. I'd give it a 4 out of 5 for presentation, and a 2 out of 5 for options and extras. What about the included games? I'm not going to run through the entire list here, but it's not a bad selection at all. If you've watched my top 20 Genesis game list, it's pretty well represented here. If I had done a top 42 list, well, a lot of these games would have made the cut. So good job selecting games, Sega. I don't agree with all of the choices, but nobody would. We get a few titles that were never formally released in America while the system was in its heyday. Plus we also get 2 unique titles for the system, in Tetris and Darius, that never came out for it at all. So I would say nice work here, and I'd give it a 4 out of 5 for game selection. What about emulation quality? Well, that's where things get a little dicey, and I have to look at it from 2 different perspectives. For the average person who isn't super into gaming and might have enjoyed these games in the past, they'll probably think that it's great and not notice any issues at all. For that type of consumer, you'll think it's just about perfect, and yeah, 5 out of 5 for you. For those who are more hardcore gamers that have been playing these games either on real hardware or emulation consistently for 30 years, the emulator crafted by M2 has what you might consider unbearable sound lag. Yeah, the sound lag problem has been documented for months now, but I can tell you it is absolutely real and it is absolutely noticeable. There's also a noticeable input lag. So if you're a hardcore Genesis fan, the emulation quality here is no more than a 3 out of 5. We've got enough information now to review the out-of-box experience. For the average consumer who just wants to replay games they haven't seen in many years, I'd give it a 4 out of 5. For the hardcore Genesis fan, the lack of options, sound lag, and input lag drop it down to a 3 out of 5. Now we can look at the fun stuff. Yeah, if you see that pure-looking innocent little Genesis Mini and think to yourself, oh yeah baby, I'm gonna violate you, then this is the section for you. You see, you can hack the Genesis Mini and add any Genesis games you want to it. But why stop there? You can add games from a host of systems. The NES, SMS, Game Boy, GBA, Sega CD, 32X, arcade, and more. You want more display options? You got them. More save state slots? Sure. Fast forward? Uh-huh. Before I delve into this section too much, I just want to stress this is not a tutorial, a how-to, or any of that jazz. There are plenty of sources both on the web and on YouTube that will walk you through every aspect of hacking your system and adding games. You can check those out if you're interested in how to perform the hacks, and I will also include some links in the description below for you. With that out of the way, there are 2 popular hacks that you can use right now. Hakchi, which also runs on the NES and SNES classics, and Project Lunar. As of the time of this recording, Hakchi offers a few more options, so I chose to go with that one. Project Lunar is still updated though, and it's entirely possible that it might provide the better experience by the time you see this video. So before you decide which hack to apply, I say read up on current information on both. Let's talk about what you can do with the hacks. First and foremost, if you like the way the Genesis Mini runs and just want to play more games, you can easily add more Genesis games, and that is extremely easy to do. It also makes it relatively easy to include box art and descriptions. If you want to add games from other systems, that's also pretty easy to do. You just drag them into the tool, and you can also get box art and descriptions for those as well. You may need to put in some effort to manually make sure all the box art and descriptions are correct, so do be aware of that. What can you run on the Genesis Mini? Well, it's a little weak hardware-wise, so you're limited a bit, but basically anything 8-bit and 16-bit will work okay. Arcade stuff will vary depending on the power of the hardware being emulated. Anything beyond the 16-bit era will be hit or miss. Another important thing you can do is select which emulators your games will run under. If you're like me and think that the sound and input lag from the default M2 developed emulator renders some of your games less enjoyable than they should be, well then you can just run them with well-established emulators like Genesis Plus and Pico Drive instead. If you're familiar with Retroarch from computers, Android, or Raspberry Pis, that's what you'll be using when you run these other emulators. Through Retroarch, which you can access directly on the Mini, you'll be able to change the aspect ratio, and you'll have way more choices than you get through the settings on the Genesis Mini's default interface. You can also enable things like fast forward through here. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that with the 3-button Genesis controllers, you won't have enough buttons to do much, so you really need another controller with more buttons to easily access all of Retroarch's awesome features. To access the Retroarch menu through Hakchi, you'll have to hit the reset button on the Mini, but you can change that to a long start button press, even if you want to keep using the included 3-button controllers. What else does the hack let you do? You can add Bluetooth support to the device. Have a nice Bluetooth controller you want to use? No problem. Want to add more storage space? Also no problem. That's right, you can move your games onto a USB device with way more room, which will let you add stuff like Sega CD games to your system. The Genesis Mini only has a very teeny tiny amount of internal memory, just a smidge over 170 megabytes. You can add plenty of Genesis games if that's all you want to do. The problem is that's not even enough space to add one Sega CD game. For that stuff, you'll probably want to go with a flash drive that's at least 32 gigabytes. Want to keep that second front USB port freed up for 2 controllers? Again, no problem! You see, the hack also enables you to use an OTG pass-through adapter. What the heck am I talking about? Well, it's basically one of these things. You see, you would plug this into the regular micro USB power jack on the back of the Mini. It has its own micro USB power port here, and then a regular USB port here. You can plug your USB flash drive or whatever you choose to put your games on into this port. Nice. Now you may look at this and think it runs slow and that some of my box art is messed up. Well, good news, you're right! But let me explain. I tried to tell the software to break the games up by system and then by letter, but it only did it by system. I can fix this, but I've had an issue with the USB drive getting corrupted when I try to do things like that. And I didn't feel like having to reformat it and re-add all the games to the hack, because writing everything to USB through Hakchi can take some time, and I didn't want to delay this video anymore. So I'm gonna fix all this, just not right now. The reason it's running so slow here is because there are so many games in each system folder, and they are not subdivided. If you keep it like under 60 games per folder, it runs just as speedy as the normal out-of-box experience. While this was not a comprehensive look at everything you can do with the Hakchi Genesis Mini, it's more than enough for you to get the idea. For me personally, I had a spare little 16 gig USB flash drive just laying around. I decided to throw on games that you could only play on an actual Sega Genesis and its add-ons, so I loaded it up with Sega Master System, Genesis, Sega CD, and 32X games. I could have just as easily put on NES, SNES, TurboGrafx, Game Boy, GBA, arcade games, and more. For my review of a Hakchi Genesis Mini, I revised that score up to a 4.5 out of 5. In conclusion, let's review. For the average Joe who isn't a hardcore Genesis fan, and just wants to replay some old games they haven't seen in the last 25 to 30 years, I would say this easily gets a 4 out of 5. They won't notice the sound and input lag, and will probably be pretty happy with the game choices. For the hardcore Genesis fan, the experience isn't nearly as good. The 3-button controllers aren't adequate and don't feel entirely authentic. The D-pad plastic is just too hard and sharp, and the C button feels mushy on one of the 2 controllers I received. These gamers will also notice the sound and input lag. For those gamers, this is a 3 out of 5. For the adventurous user that doesn't mind hacking their system and risking breaking it, well, the experience is vastly better. You get way more options, can run way more games from a variety of systems, and even add capabilities to the system like OTG and Bluetooth support. The only thing holding it back here is the relatively weak hardware and those 3-button controllers. For those who hack the system, it's easily a 4.5 out of 5. And I gotta be honest, if they'd included 6-button controllers with this instead of 3, I would have given it a straight up 5 out of 5. One final note I'll add, because it's very relevant to what I was just talking about, is you can actually use other controllers with this thing. So for most of this review, I've been using a Retrobit Saturn pad. I've got the one that came with the USB and Saturn port dongles. So if Sega had included 6-button controllers with the Genesis Mini, like they did for the Mega Drive Mini in Japan, then I would say this review for the hacked unit would have been a full 5 out of 5 instead of a 4.5 out of 5. And that brings us to the end of yet another video, my retro gaming friends. Do you have a Sega Genesis Mini? If so, how do you use the system? Go ahead and share it with us in the comments below. For now though, I'll have to say, thanks for watching, and see me later.